Rogelio, if I could just begin with you. So, of course, Mexico is at the center of global debates on manufacturing right now. So we've all been hearing a lot about Mexican manufacturing through watching the US election campaign. But even before that, Mexico had been a country that had seen quite a big increase in the amount of manufacturing going on in the economy. So when you think about the trends in supply chains, in trade, in technology, that are happening in the manufacturing, the global sense, what are the most important elements for Mexico, and what are your priorities?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and I think that the disruptive technologies change and will change and will continue to change the different patterns of the production, of the trade, and we need to work with them. And I think that the big challenge of this, as a country like Mexico, for example, the big challenge is how can we work with the human capital, and how can we work with the small and medium enterprises in the value chain of the production. Mm-hmm. I think that these 2 points, the human capital, the convert this human capital or work with this human capital, and the small and medium enterprises are now the big challenge for Mexico in this moment with this.
What is something that you think governments can do to help small and medium enterprises to take advantage of some of these new technologies, which often are quite expensive to use?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think that as a government, we need to fully understand what is our degree or our stage in that we work, the stage of our change in the manufacture. This means that if you understand perfect the stage in that you work, you can apply the better policy to this. If you understand the level of adoption of technologies in the small and medium enterprises, we can define the policy to get or to support, to push this small and medium enterprise to adopt technology and work together with the biggest companies mm-hmm. that goes very fast with the technology and the small and medium enterprises.
Okay. We'll come back to, I think, corporations and SMEs later on, but just now to move on to Jerzy Kwieciński. So you're from the Ministry of Economic Development in Poland, so one of the deputy ministers for that department. Now, Poland's had a big transition over the last sort of 20, 30 years, transitioning from communist to post-communist economy, and has been one of the most successful industrial economies in sort of the former Eastern Europe. When you look ahead, what are the 2 or 3 trends that you think are going to cause the biggest problems for Poland that your ministry is preparing for?
Thank you. And let me maybe to begin with saying that we are living in a changing world. Even here, every day we can see the rain. When we arrived here, we could note even a rainy storm, early in the morning. Today in the morning it was also raining, and we've got completely different picture of this part, of the world. So, the world is changing. No, that was of course a joke, but quite true, yeah. So it's not only that I noted that, yeah. However, in this changing world and talking about disruptive, disruptive economies, disruptive, sector, we have to say that we have to decide whether this new change, which we treat as a threat to our societies, to our economies, and whether we want to treat it as a chance. And I think this is what we have decided, as the government to do. We treat this new phenomenon as a chance. This will be the chance, say, not only for consumers, as we all very often name it, you know, in our economic language, but we consider that this will be for the benefit of our societies, but provided that the whole society will benefit from that, and not only the elites or a part of the society. So, I mean, what we have to do, you know, as politicians, you know, we have to make the proper diagnosis of that, this can be beneficial, you know, for our economies, for society. We have to define the vision, to prepare a plan, a strategy for that, and to implement it. You very well referred, you know, to Poland as a successful case. That's true. Recently, we have been named as the country the most successful besides Korea in transforming, in transitioning from the middle income to high income economy. And we are very sure that we have managed to do that due to the manufacturing. Manufacturing accounts for almost 1/4 of our economy. But I think you are not right saying, and referring to the United States or to the UK economy, that manufacturing accounts only for 10%, because you take into account only pure manufacturing. Mm-hmm. But if you take auxiliary services, which are related to that, then this will show you that almost a half of the economy will be directly or indirectly attached, you know, to the manufacturing. What else? Usually, manufacturing, industrial sector, accounts for 2/3 of innovations which are being implemented, you know, in the economy. And what is even more important, that these are jobs with high value added. Mm-hmm. And that is extremely important for us, because as we want to grow, as we want our people to earn more, we have to look for jobs with higher value added. This is what we in Poland decided. We decided to prepare a new strategy, which is the strategy of sustainable development in all terms, in economic, territorial, social, and also environmental terms. But we call it the strategy for responsible development. Why? Because we take into account what is happening, you know, now in our country, but also we want to take care of the future. So we have to be, you know, responsible for our nation. And we very much believe that this we can do with much better functioning manufacturing sector. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that is not so obvious, because, you know, even, you know, in Europe, we can hear that at the corridors of Brussels, so say our capital, there are different voices about manufacturing. But we join forces, for example, with Germany, with France, you know, talking about a new feature of the industrial policy, mm-hmm. advocating for that, you know, in the European Union.
Mm. I think it's a very relevant point to make, that when we talk about manufacturing, we actually have to remember that a lot of it now is services. And manufacturing policy also now has to consider services policy. And I think we're going to come back to the employment point in our discussion later on too. Peter, if we could move on to you. So you're an MP, a Member of Parliament in Germany, and you represent a constituency in the southwestern state of Bavaria, so one of... Eastern? Oh, southeastern, sorry. One of the manufacturing heartlands of Germany. How are you seeing these new trends in supply chains and technology having an impact in the area that you're from?
Well, let me make one crucial assessment. Our decisive recipe for economic success was always to say a clear yes and to agree to all these developments. Be it 50 years ago after World War II, when a country like mine, the state of Bavaria, was the poorest state among the nowadays 16 states in Germany, now being the most successful one. And if we would have denied the transition from purely agricultural and mining state to a almost, well, to a certain extent still agricultural but no mining anymore. But in fact, manufacturing country, if we would have denied that, we would still be very, very poor. But we are a stronghold of German economy because of a clear yes to all these transitions. And this is also why my first commitment in regard and in respect of globalization, digitalization, and what you call disruption is to say a clear yes. Do never try to avoid all these developments. Say a clear yes and try to shape it as far as necessary, but also from the political point of view, only interfere as much as needed and not more. Although, of course, we have to shape these things, because we have also to notice, and predominantly as being politicians, there is not only applause for all that, but there are many fears, not only among the workers, but also on the sector of small family-owned companies who feel overwhelmed by all these developments. And we have to take them the fear. We have to explain things. We have to have a very frank and open debate about everything what happens. And now we are talking about disruption. The word disruption might cause fears because it's a negative notion. We should in fact, I'm not a journalist or specialist in media or communications, but although you have to be sort of expert on communication, being a politician for many decades. But I would replace the word disruption rather by a word like digital opportunities or digital change, digital opportunities. It's the opportunities which really made Germany successful in the world in the economic perspective. And my last assessment, but that does also refer to that, what I've just said. We have to keep the markets open. I'm really very, very concerned about new policies closing markets. Germany's recipe have never in past been closed markets, but only having open markets, having the opportunities of open markets, not only in Germany for imports, but also worldwide, has made Germany successful. And this is why I really agree to free trade agreements, but maybe we discuss that later on.
Yeah, I do want to come back to the political angle and international trade. But so as your key message is we have to embrace all these changes and admit they're happening and run at them head on and integrate them in our societies and our economies so that we don't get left behind. So I'm really pleased that we've have Minister Hartarto here from Indonesia, the Minister for Industry. So Indonesia, I think, is a great example of a country that is at the cutting edge of manufacturing development now. So Indonesia right now has a manufacturing sector. It's not as large as some other countries in Asia, but it would like to become larger. So Indonesia is one of those countries looking to use manufacturing to help it move up from that middle to higher income status. When you look around the world today, do you think now is a more difficult time than, say, 10 years ago for a country such as Indonesia to get into manufacturing and use it as a path to growth?
I think Indonesia is benefiting from the current technologies that embrace in the market. Okay. Indonesia currently, as a perspective, is the largest countries in ASEAN with 250 million people and home of 250 million of smartphone. The smartphone market is 60 million per year. It's growing market. And social media also has been used as the third largest after United States. And industrial sectors contribute 18% of gross domestic product. That's not including the service. If you include the service, it's 30% of GDP. So we have actually the basis for manufacturing. And our manufacturing is based on broad-based basis. based on the minerals, based on the resources that are available, agricultures, agro-based industry, as well as we are developing a labor-intensive export-oriented product. So looking into the regional development, Indonesia is emphasis on building the manufacturing sectors broad-based where the source is. We still do the mining, we still do the petrochemicals, we still do the production of automotive, which is we produce almost 1.8 million of automotive, and we are one of the largest of motorcycle producer. We are producing 8 million of motorcycle per year, and also export to many countries, including Europe. So I think our strategy with the new digitalization is actually we try to combine between the digital economics to sustain the competitive basis, like in the food industry, whereby we use the Industry 4.7, but in the combination of the end of the process, you have one straight through 300 meters of automatic line, but at the end of that line, we employ many people for packagings. So we embrace the digital as well as the labor intensive at the end of the value chain.
Okay. Yeah. So when you mentioned Indonesia has 250 million people, which it does, so it's obviously a very large country in terms of population. But I'd actually like to sort of contrast with Indonesia's approach with something Peter said about Germany, which is, for Germany, the idea of openness has been very important. Yeah, so open markets, investment and imports into Germany, investment and exports out of Germany. Now, Indonesia does not quite take that approach, does it? So Indonesia's economy is not as open to foreign investment, say, as Germany's is. There's lots of restrictions on the types of manufacturing sectors that foreign investors can access. Do you think that Indonesia will eventually adopt the German model of openness, or do you think that a different path is more appropriate?
I think on the contrary, Indonesia is very open. Our import duty average is only 8%. And Indonesian industry is open for foreign investment, for foreign direct investment. And one of the fuel for Indonesia growth is from foreign direct investment. So there is no limitation for foreign investment to invest in Indonesia. The only limitation for investment is only for dangerous traded goods, which is not only in Indonesia, for other countries also is limited.
Although there is quite a substantial negative list of sectors in which foreigners cannot invest.
Yeah, Yes, please. Which one?
Such as mining and minerals.
I think mineral of mining is the first things that Indonesia embarking on investment because of the production of, for instance, I'm selling about bauxite. Bauxite is only $30 commodities. And Indonesia has been exporting bauxite for more than 40 years. And for 40 years is creating damage in environment. So what Indonesians do is actually added value of this bauxite. Indonesia have aluminum smelting, which is actually produce about 600 tons. And the alumina also being used for the automotive industry. In the past, the bauxite from Indonesia has to travel to Australia or to Japan to convert into alumina. And alumina has traveled to Indonesia again to be melted into aluminum ingot. And from aluminum ingot have to travel to Japan to produce aluminum alloy. Then this aluminum alloy has to travel again to Indonesia to produce engine block. So today's situation is different. With the incentive for mineralization value added, we produce alumina for 1 million ton can be used in aluminum smelters, and we increase the capacity of aluminum smelters and can be used for engine block in automotive. So it saves a lot of travel of raw materials, and as well as for ferronickel it's only $40. Currently, we make a huge investment, about 5 billion, and the investment is not only made by the Indonesian, but also for foreign direct investment. And today we can produce by the end of this year 3 million ton of stainless steel.
It's an interesting example you give of the aluminium supply chain.
Right.
So how international it is. So the supply chain you described from Indonesia to Australia to Japan,
right,
and then back to Indonesia. And I'd like to use that just sort of as a link to start the discussion with the panel about the political element, yeah, of manufacturing these international supply chains and how technologies might change that, because the manufacturing supply chains have been a political issue in Indonesia. But if we start with Mexico, where of course we've been hearing Trump talk a lot about your manufacturing sector. When you look around the world and you see maybe a turn away from free trade or towards protectionism, manufacturing becoming much more of an emotional kind of issue rather than an economic issue, what's your perspective on where the politics of manufacturing is going?
Yes, well, if you analyze, Mexico is an open country, totally open. We have a free trade agreement with 46 countries in the world, and the economy is totally open for the foreign investment and all. With the new change of the government of the United States, the idea of the government of the United States is that we can review, or we can modernize the free trade agreement with them. They say that the manufacture in United States in the last years is going down, and in Mexico is rising in the last years a lot. And well, I think if you analyze the last period, the last 20 years since Mexico signs the free trade agreement with Canada and United States, if you analyze these 20 years, you can see some issues, important issues, I think. First, the trade between the countries is growing 8 times in these 20 years. 8 times growing the trade between the countries. If you analyze the foreign invest between the countries, is multiplied by 4 between the countries. This is that the free trade agreement are a very good agreement for all the countries that are members of this agreement. Now, the new idea of the government of the United States is not only with Mexico, is with all these. They want to check the balance of commerce by sector. And this is very complicated, because if you want to analyze sector by sector, for example, automotive sector, if you analyze all the cars that Mexico sent to United States as a final product, but you don't analyze the change of the products, and the products that sometimes we have a product, auto part, products that going down 3 times between the countries with different technologies or different process to get the final product, to introduce the car and send to the final product. All this is a complete program to commerce. And I understand that the question that the political, this political time now is a risk to the...
Do you think it's a permanent change or a temporary change in the political environment?
No, I think that it's temporary change.
A temporary change.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we need to find a good agreement with this.
Right. Peter, if I can bring you in on this point. So you mentioned in your introductory remarks that you're worried about the openness of the international system. Of course, Germany has been a big beneficiary. It's a very large exporter. Do you feel worried that the world is sort of permanently moving away from an open trading environment for manufacturing?
I think I consider it impossible that this would be a fundamental development for the next 10 or 20 years because open markets, open economies are so have been so fundamental for economic success worldwide and also for reduction of worldwide poverty. We must not forget that. We have a decline in global poverty, and this is also an outcome of our worldwide success, and economic success is an outcome of open markets. I consider it to be absolutely ludicrous that on the last G20 summit, the Chinese president explained us the necessity of open markets, and Trump says no. The US say no, it's impossible, it's ridiculous. And this is why, once given that the Chinese argue like that, this is sort of guarantee for me, it's a promise, that the second biggest economy worldwide says yes to open markets. We say, the European Union says yes to open markets. And this is why I'm not worried, to answer your question very precisely and, and shortly.
Yeah, great. Jerzy, if I can ask a perspective from you about how to do this communication with the public, because I mean, I'm thinking about Poland's transition over the last few decades. There obviously has been a lot of, you've had to convince people of the benefits of a new system. And when we see more politicians turning against free trade and more people turning against free trade in manufacturing, what are some ideas for how we can get the right messages out into the public debate?
That's true. That is extremely important to properly, communicate that to, to the world. And I fully agree with my colleagues, with predecessors, that we will not stop openness, of the markets, despite some attempts for protectionism, which we can now observe. But I think it will not be long-lasting, and this is a little bit, a reaction towards some practices which are introduced by large international corporations, and this is something what we have to look at in the coming months and years, and which are very well heard during the summits, and that is that this large corporation that avoid paying taxes, corporate taxes, they can benefit from having offices in different countries. And they are also avoid, paying VAT taxes. So we've got some problems, but I think these are problems which can be solved. I would say pretty quickly. But the proper communication is that this can be beneficial, for the society. If you said to Polish people, 20 years ago, that we would be at the stage as we are now, nobody would believe. We are the country which for the last 25 years most benefited, from this economic breakthrough. So that shows exactly that openness, be very, very open, to this economic changes in the world can be very, very beneficial, for the society. The problem is, of course, with inequalities, because you've got them everywhere, and not only across the countries, you've got them also, within the countries. So at the same time, you have to pursue proper regional development policies. That, for example, is not only the center of your country, the capital, which benefits, that you can prepare and efficiently manage the policy, which is beneficial for the people living, in different regions, so that you have proper economy, but what is important services, such as education, health services. So, if you can communicate that properly, but from the positive and not from the negative perspective, you will manage. And I will very much agree with Peter, what he said. We shouldn't say it about disruptive sector, disruptive, economies. This is, this is pure negative connotation which you journalists, you pursue, through the media.
Yeah, that's why we would never get elected.
Be more positive as we are.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and take that on board. I just want to grab an Indonesian perspective, but just before I do, I've got a list of questions I was going to run through, but I'd be very happy to take some comments from the audience. So after we hear from Erlangga, I'll throw it out to the audience. If anybody wants to raise their hand to ask a question to any of our panel of ministers and politicians and secretaries of state that we have, that we're lucky enough to have up here on stage. So please do think about your question in the meantime. But Erlangga, could I ask you about the public in Indonesia? So it's a very different economy to the others that we have represented here. What is the opinion, what is public opinion like in Indonesia with respect to manufacturing? Are people excited about it as a job opportunity or worried about changes to their way of life or something else?
I think Indonesia understand that one of the potential job opportunities that create more jobs is from manufacturing sectors. And so we are embarking to put more investment incentive and also industrial estate in many regions of Indonesia, not only in the main island. But also for embarking into the new digital economics. Probably I agree with Peter that we try to use digital economy to create jobs, not to dismantle jobs. Like we have initiative in our ministry to develop a platform for small and medium enterprises. And this is SME, smart SMEs, whereby through a logistic kind of thing is more difficult from the buyer of small and medium enterprises production to meet the buyer. But through the digital economics, we can create a 1 million vendor to 6 million buyers within 2 years. And then also with digitalization of your smartphone, then we can create services to provide not only disruptive for the people transportation, but to use bikes to transport not only people, but to transport food as well as service. So now we have a trend of, we call it Gojek, Go Food, Go many things, including Go Payment. So I think this job is created, which is before is unavailable. So I think we use this digital to create and to empower the small and medium enterprises, as well as we use the manufacturing sectors to deepen Indonesian manufacturing sectors. And we talk within the ASEAN to enhance the regional global value chains. What is available in Thailand, what is available in Malaysia to add value through other countries. Even though today's trade and in ASEAN only comprise 30% of each countries, but we would like to deepen this value chain. Yeah.
Well, if ASEAN's economies did become a single market, the economic value there would be, actually it would be the same as Germany, would be the size of Southeast Asia if they were all one integrated market.
Without China.
Oh yeah, no, just the 10 Southeast Asian countries. So I've got some more questions, but I've had a good go at asking the panel. So I'd like to throw it out to the audience. Would anybody like to raise their hands and ask the panel? We have a question down the front here. I think there are some microphones that we'll walk around.
Thank you very much. Really, we have a concern in the industrial sector. We are presenting the industrial sector in Kuwait country. For the gentlemen here, we have a concern. Defining the open market. Is it against, or there's a conflict to define open market with protection for the national products? You know, there's always demand locally to protect our national product against even competitiveness. So is it two different things, or we should go more globally and not be worried about the open market? It is really a concern we have in our mind always, and how we achieve the two things in the same time. Okay. Thank you.
I might just see if there's one or two more questions and we can take them all as a group. Did anybody else from the audience have a question they'd like to make?
Who was asked no?
Was it that question about Kuwait directed to anyone in particular, or? Yeah. I think we'll just say anybody who feels inspired. I don't see any other hands going up. Oh, one over there. Yeah. And after this question, I'll then ask the panel to share any thoughts they've got about the two questions.
Hi. Yeah, hi. I'll make it a very direct question, but anyone of the gentlemen can pick it up. How do you see the role of government in developing R&D and intellectual property changing with the Industry 4.0?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, who'd like to kick off with responding to either of those questions? Yeah, Jerzy?
You know, let me start. I mean, there's problems with, you know, with protection of products. You've got them everywhere. But I would distinguish, you know, between the promotion of locally produced products with protection of a certain territory, usually the country, from other products. You know, we can observe that competition is the source of development. If there is no competition, there will be no improvement. However, in order to mobilize businesses, especially small, medium-sized businesses, you have to help them to grow. And usually the way to do it is to help them promoting, you know, their products on the local markets. Mm-hmm. You know, the second question is, I think, much more interesting. I mean, is how to expand, you know, using innovations, and for innovation you must have well-developed R&D sector. I mean, you know, everybody now in the world is talking, you know, about innovation, about R&D spending. But what is the most necessary is to have proper infrastructure from the very beginning. So from the moment you involve researchers, scientists to work on particular undertakings, till the moment when products and services are placed in the market. Okay. And we have to admit that here in this part of the world, in Europe, we are not as good as, for example, there are people in the United States or even, you know, in Israel. Half of the startups which emerge in the European Union, they escape from the European Union, mainly right. to the, you know, to the United States. So I would say, yes, we have to focus on R&D, yeah. But then we have to focus on proper commercialization of the results of R&D works.
Peter, on R&D, what do you think the government's role in the future should be? I mean, Germany's been a big innovator in R&D, but countries in Asia are now issuing more patents, so China now the biggest patent issuer.
Yes, of course, Germany has been successful, but not by closing markets and only allegedly protecting local products, I take up this question, but by putting them on stage, throwing them into global competition. I know the times I started being in politics 30 years ago, and I exactly remember when there were requirements even from the Association of German Farmers in regard to local food production, protect them, and so on and so on. No, we never protected them. We offered them to global markets, and Germany is top in exporting top-notch agricultural products. But there is one different thing. We, of course, want to maintain local brands. Local brands, there are many, many examples. The Munich Weißwurst, for instance, or Munich beer, or things like that. Or the Berlin curry sausage, the local brands. But the local brands are, in fact, to give for the customers, to have transparency for the customers. We don't want to protect them, but we want to maintain such local brands. This does not conflict with open markets. And again, open markets, if protectionism, of course, if you close markets, that is nothing else but protectionism, in fact. But if you go this way, I'm sure if the new American president continues this way, he will also fight innovation in the States. And this is the wrong way. We have to keep open our markets to foster and to emphasize innovation. This is the way where we have to go. And what the other question was, what was it?
R&D. But maybe, Erlang, if I could come on to you for an R&D perspective, which is Indonesia's at a much earlier stage of industrialization. Do you think R&D is important for Indonesia, or is it more important for Indonesia to adopt existing technologies first?
First, Indonesia policy is to adapting the technologies because we need to catch up with the global growth. Second, of course, on certain area, we do have government budget for R&D, especially for agriculture as well as for agro-base. And the third is, of course, I would like to, government give incentive for private sectors to enhance the R&D, and we have fiscal facilities that any research can be deducted for their income taxes. So we foster of these things, and on top of it, we ask the university to work closely with the industry. So I think with triangular concept, we hope that we can catch up with the R&D. And the third, actually, I would like to comment about the open market and fair trade. Fair trade is important because the trade is not only on the tariff, but also a lot of standard or non-barrier trade. And non-barrier trade is something that's underlying of the trade. And for Indonesia, it's very simple. If the product is competitive, other countries put safeguard. And we got many safeguard on many products. So it means that we are competitive. Yeah. So on the discussion with EU, for instance, we have a strong of palm oil, which is on the discussion. We are trying to put it in, but of course there is some opposition here and there. Yeah. And for paper, for instance, we are top 10 paper producers. We have also some trade barrier from United States. Even the simplest for the coffee, for instance, we export coffee in mixtures as a complete product. That is certain ingredients which is not allowed in other countries. So I think we are promoting for the open market because Indonesia growth rely on the global market. Okay. 60% of Indonesian growth is domestic market, but 40% is from global market. So this is what we are.
So we shouldn't forget standards, and I think it's not just an issue of regulation in terms of standards, but also consumer demand, so the types of things that people want. So for palm oil, it's not so much food safety, but I think it's more about public opinion in the destination markets. So we have run out of time, and I know everybody wants to get to lunch, but I'm just going to give Peter and Rogelio a chance for a last 30 seconds, and then we'll let you get some food. Yeah.
Two final remarks to what they said and to complement the remarks on this second question. Yeah. One part of this question was, what do policymakers have to do? One field is definitely R&D. This is true, and I absolutely agree what has been said about that. But two other things are still very important for us policymakers. One is to guarantee competition. I think this is not to avoid competition, to guarantee competition. And that means, for instance, to reduce barriers for the market access for startup companies, for instance, and to avoid monopolization, especially on the digitalization market, Apple, Facebook, and things like that. These are tremendous challenges we are facing. And second, what governments and policymakers have to do. Somebody talked about intellectual property. I do not remember who it was of the questionnaires. We have to guarantee a proper legal framework, such as protection of intellectual property, of patents. This is very, very important for a country like mine. We have to guarantee data security in a digitalized world with all the disruptions, as we said. Pardon?
Opportunities.
Opportunities, challenges, opportunities. Data security in a world of new opportunities. This is very important, and I want to underline what our Polish friend just said, infrastructure. This is so important. This is the basis, and not only the broadband things and so on, but also physical infrastructure, because at the end, when a good has to come to the consumer, you know, it's maybe one day it's done by robots or flying the small helicopters and things like that, drones exactly, and they put it into a Dropbox. But nonetheless, sort of physical infrastructure
some of the old-fashioned policies
has still to be guaranteed.
Yeah.
This is what I just wanted to add. What has been said.
Yeah. Okay. And Rogelio, any final comment from you?
Yes, thanks. I think that the role of the policymakers in the growing, in the emerging markets, more in emerging markets, I think that is fundamental. And I think that this role can be in the areas that in the market by itself can resolve the problems. If you can develop the human capital for some activity, you need to put some policy to help in this. If you see that the smaller enterprises can't adopt the technology with the faster as you need put policies in that way. And I think that this is the role, fundamental role for the policymakers.
Okay. Before we go, can you please thank my panel here, Rogelio Garza, Undersecretary of Mexico, Jerzy Kwieciński, Minister of Economic Development in Poland, Peter Ramsauer, MP's Chair of Economic Affairs Committee in Germany, and Erlangga Hartarto, Minister of Industry in Indonesia. Thanks very much.